welcome to another episode of Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey, and today we are here to talk about the Book of Boba Fett. We will get into all those details of what positives and negatives that may bring. Today I am joined by entertainment journalist extraordinaire. I'll go that way. I always try to go one too far with that introduction to make it embarrassing. But welcome to the show, Eammon Jacobs.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
And 10 out of 10 points for pronunciation, by the way.
My last name's O'Leary. Like, I have to get that shit right.
yeah.
If I would be ousted from genetics if that was actually, yeah. No, it's I double check to make sure that my Americanisms don't come through and say Eammon, because I know that is more than likely the way that this side of the ocean probably pronounces it. Yeah.
Well, you know, you're off to a great start already, so
wonderful. Cool. Well, DNA aside, we can get into the Book of Boba Fett. We're gonna jump right into spoiler stuff because honestly, I don't think it's something that could be avoided now anyway, with the fact that the show's already ended and the biggest episodes already were revealed. Generally speaking, how did you feel about this show though?
I mean, you know, look, it's Star Wars. I like Star Wars. I enjoyed it on a base level. Even like my least favorite Star Wars films, I enjoy them. So I did, you know, the weekly format still works for me. I still liked my little dose of a galaxy far, far away. That being said, it's incredibly messy. And, you know, cameos aside, I think this is a bit of a disappointment where Boba's concerned, for me.
Yeah, so my kind of view on it is I like the story they were trying to tell. I like the idea of Boba Fett being a changed man after experiencing being in the belly of the Sarlacc. Like, that's a cool, because if he was just the same guy, like, that'd be fine, whatever. But like, learning a new way of life to come out of that is kind of a cool thing. I do think also that the fact that they made this its own show instead of just doing the Mandalorian season 3 with a little arc at the beginning of it as like, oh cool, we're following up on that Boba Fett tease as the beginning of this, because like Clone Wars had so many arcs where it's like, yeah, Clone Wars is about the era of the Clone Wars. It's not necessarily about the war every episode. Like you have Anakin going and confronting like the spirits of the Force, and that has nothing to do with the wars. So like, I think people could have accepted this, especially with the fact that like 2 of these episodes were definitely just episodes of The Mandalorian. If they just did
almost backdoor pilots for season 3,
right, yeah. And
strange.
So if they just kind of truncated it down to 6 episodes and did 3 episodes of Boba Fett stuff in Mandalorian season 3 with, you know, 4 and 5 still could be the Mandalorian setup stuff of how he then gets back to Tatooine or whatever. That would have been a better process, I think, for me, and a better, like, it just would have been a better format in general, because I think when you tease, you know, the big return of Boba Fett last season in The Mandalorian and say, like, he's getting his own show, like, the expectation is then on his own show. And it wasn't, and I think it wasn't fully that.
It wasn't. And I think it's more of a problem with Disney as a whole and the industry as a whole, is that we seem to be really reliant on nostalgia and fan service. And, you know, I'm a sucker for, you know, feeling like a kid again. When the Naboo Starfighter showed up, I grinned so hard.
That like, whole episode was the good balance. Like that. It was first episode 5 was that balance of like, okay, they are progressing the story forward to tell you how he gets back to Tatooine to meet back up with Boba Fett, but they're also giving you all this like prequel like flourish that, you know, sure, some of the audience won't like, but yeah, like they gave you the pod race. They gave you the pod race.
Yeah, exactly.
which I love, because I like, that's a thing when, with me being like an audio nerd, even when it was not even on DVD yet, my brother had a surround sound system before like the family did. He this is when he was in high school and I was in 8th grade, so I was in middle school. And or even no, it was probably like even 7th grade maybe, but he had like taken over our finished part of the basement as his bedroom, as a teenager will do, and then set up a surround sound system because his buddy worked at a place called Cambridge Soundworks, which is now really not a thing, or at least not what it was back then. They don't really make speakers anymore. They just make like all in one, like the little pill radio things, which is disappointing. But like I still have Cambridge Soundworks set, like that speaker right there is still a Cambridge Soundworks speaker from like 1999. But like he had this whole thing set up downstairs, and The Phantom Menace was only on VHS at the time, and he got the collector's edition of that, and he was like, hey, come downstairs. This was, I mean, I had seen it in theaters and whatnot, but come downstairs and check this out. And it was the first time that I had really experienced like the at-home movie theater setup, where it's like I go to a movie theater and I experience like the THX stuff there or whatever. Like that's, it's also 1999, so it's basically like glorified stereo at that point. But like to experience 5.1 like on a VHS, like that, there's a very specific memory for me to like have that come back and be like, oh shit, they're doing it. Oh shit, they're doing it. So yeah, all those notes hit perfectly, but
it was almost like it counterbalanced it, but in the wrong way.
Yeah.
Because
or even like, overcorrected.
Yeah.
In the wrong way. Yeah.
I just this was Boba Fett's story, and after like practically 40 years ish of fans wanting to see more of him,
as an adult at least,
as an adult, not as a baby clone. I just think it was a bit of a misstep, but I enjoyed it at the same time, and it's really, I think it's in a really strange middle ground of like, yeah, I loved it, but that's not the story that they should have been telling.
Right.
And I think some fans definitely feel shortchanged, which is understandable. But then at the same time, how could you not love Grogu in a Beskar chainmail vest? I mean, that was adorable.
Yeah, they made him a little Frodo. It was fantastic.
It was a mithril vest.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It was bittersweet.
Yeah, because that's the thing is, I do like, there are structure things that I like that they were trying to do. Like I like the back and forth of non-linear storytelling they were doing until it ran its course.
Yeah,
like
it's like, oh, he's in a back tank.
4 episodes of that was too much. Yeah,
like 2, I'd have understood. 2 would have been the right amount of like a good combination, but I quite liked that they did play with it and rip him out.
Yes, and that was the moment when we never. That was when they said, "Okay, we're done doing this," because they didn't go back to that anymore. Which I was like, "Okay, cool, I like that." I just wish we got there quicker.
Yes,
because it was like, just like I was saying, like 7 episodes should have been 6 episodes. Like, I feel like if there were only 3 episodes that were the Boba Fett episodes up front, it would have helped that feeling a little bit. Because like,
yeah, I think it would have given it more of an event feeling as well. Because the momentum just kind of died. In the last 3 episodes, the finale I cared a bit, but 5 and 6, I was like, why do I care about Boba Fett anymore?
Yeah,
like I just want Mandalorian season 3.
So, and that's the thing that I said this on Twitter, and I don't think I can maybe even conveyed it as well there, but like, The Mandalorian is an era of Star Wars. It's not a show, at least the way that they're like setting it up. Yeah. It's no longer just a show. This is Clone Wars. This is like, it is just like, this time period is the Mandalorian era. So like, I don't think that they can differentiate that to the extent that they think that they are, by doing like, oh, here's Boba Fett show, but we're still on Tatooine. We're still dealing with a lot of the same characters that we were dealing with The Mandalorian. And the only real difference is like the showrunner is Robert Rodriguez, so it has like his tone to it, including cyborg teenagers, which I'm totally fine with. And I actually liked the Vespas. I think they're cheesy as hell, and I am totally fine with that.
They worked better in the finale.
Yes.
They seem to just fit in with the landscape more. When they first debuted, I was like, "Oh, okay, right, that's a tonal clash to say the least." Like
that chase scene also is very slow in that earlier episode. Like nobody's going high speed, so it's a little bit strange. But like, I think the idea of it is cool because they're just like teenage roughabouts that are saying "F the man," basically. So I'm like, cool, I'm fine with that. That's totally cool. You want to put some Alita Battle Angel in here? I didn't love that movie, but that's fine. It's totally all right.
And like the more Sophie Thatcher we get, the better, quite frankly. You know, she was excellent in Yellow Jackets, so it was great to see her like do other things. Although she was a little bit of a not quite the same character, but you could kind of see the shared DNA
a little typecast, right?
But yeah, a little bit. But
it's also disappointing. Yeah, it's a little disappointing too with the fact that it's like I don't know any of their names at all.
They are mod 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, they are muscle. Like if you're gonna introduce like all like Chrysanthemum, we know that was like an impactful moment, and then we learned his name and we were like, cool. I'm never forgetting his name. I mean, I already knew his name from the comics, but still. But it's just one of those things where it's like these things that you're trying to do are just spread apart too much, where it's like you need if you're introducing a whole gang of cyborg teenagers, at least let us learn a couple names so we can like be endeared to them, because I think that's sort of the problem with like how the internet reacted to it is like this is like dumb, fun, cheesy, but like unless you endear a character, it stays dumb, fun, cheesy, and then it's open for the making fun of part because it's
and I mean,
you don't care.
Help with the random twirl in the middle of a gunfight.
But that is Robert Rodriguez. You'll love it or hate it. That is extremely Robert.
Like,
yeah, it is. Yeah,
like, I wasn't like, oh well, that was terrible. It made me laugh, and it kind of it added to his character. I guess he's just a little bit more flamboyant than the rest of them.
I think the editing hurt that more too, because the way that it cuts, like the twirl. If it looked like he was like lifting up his arm and then like in the same movement twirling, it would have looked better. And it just needed a snip of like 3/4 of a second taken away. But like, because you see Chrysanthemum's arm go up and then there's like a moment, like a pregnant pause in between that and him twirling, that's where you get in trouble with like, okay, this is now you're getting dumb stuff. That's sort of the, like another problem with this whole series is like a lot of the action was just not impactful, especially the early episodes though. Like that fight with Boba and Fennec Shand against the guys with the shields in episode 1, and then like the foot chase.
There were so many cuts. It was like
there's so many cuts, but it's still
all over again.
Yeah, but like usually when you add cuts, it's supposed to like add impact and add like a brutality to it, and it somehow made it feel slower. That's sort of this whole show is like it's cutting too much stuff together and making it feel sluggish because of that. And that's it is a bummer.
Compared to like Mandalorian season 1 and 2, like those seasons seemed to fly by. And it was like, oh, we're at the finale already. Whereas Boba just seemed sort of, all right, we're 3 episodes in. Cool, right, fine.
Yeah.
Seemed to really take its time getting going, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it did do some really interesting things to start with, like all the Tusken Raider stuff.
Yep.
at first I was like, where is this going? Like, this is really interesting. Like even down to like the sign language and the um he uses like traditional Maori like chants and stuff, doesn't he?
Yep.
Like when he's fully embraced into the tribe. And I was like, that's really fascinating. That's amazing. Do more things like that, and it'll have more of an impact. And then it was just like, oh yeah, they're dead now.
Yeah. And
Cool.
that's sort of the thing too, is just like that episode or two episodes
Hmm.
was the most fascinating part of the actual like Boba Fett episodes through this season. And it's unfortunate that they then decided to, like, if you want to use that and use that as his motivation, I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
There needs to be a quicker pace to what he wants to do after that. To go into a heavily sort of housed area, I'll say, like a city,
Mm.
and then add 37 different factions of people that you then have to interact with. Like, the motivation is gone. You're setting up like a mystery that never needed to be there with like who's doing the spice. It's like, you already said who's running the spice. Like, you showed them take down the train. We don't need to like who's really behind this, and then to reveal it's the same people we already met. Like, that's just poorly executed formatting, where it's like, guys, you had us at the beginning. Like, as much
Yeah.
as some people may have not loved the slower pace and maybe the direction of like seeing him become a changed man, that is the story that you were telling, and you just deflected into a completely sort of generic gang war that like never really came to fruition in a cool way. Like, the finale episode is super fun and I love the action that's in it, but like there wasn't that much about the actual like Boba trying to protect the city from the spice runners like story
I
part
mean,
of that.
he kind of didn't, because like Sanctuary got bombed,
Yep.
and that was great. That felt really like
It's
Sopranos,
time to
kind of
ratchet it up.
Scorsese. Yeah, and I was like, that's a really interesting, cool point that he didn't protect the city. Really, I mean, sure, he was, you know, everybody was shooting up the pikes and those huge Scorpion droids, fine, but they weren't really protecting the citizens. Like, I don't know. I know he's a crime lord, but it kind of undercut the whole rule with respect thing.
Yeah.
It was like,
Because
yeah, you
also,
kind of just saying that for the sake of it rather than actually doing it.
yeah, because like the other factions, even if they said like one other faction was with him, that would have been so much more impactful because he would have at least gotten through to one section of the city. But like every other crime family is like, nah, F him. We don't want to be with him. And then it's just like, all right, the odds are too hard almost to overcome at that point to be like realistically overcome. Like, it's just too, there's too, it's too much in such a heavy-handed way that it's like it's detrimental to, he's never a true underdog because he's pushed so far down that like there's no way he could possibly, like, I guess that's the metaphor of like he's down in the belly and he comes back up for, but it's like,
Yeah.
you need to actually put a net of believability somewhere, because if you're below that, then it's just like, all right, well, he can do anything now. he he might as well have Jedi powers because whatever. But
Yeah.
like, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I just wanted more depth to it. And like you're saying, this whole thing about him growing as a person, there is a really interesting story in that. Like, you know, he goes through a crucible of, you know, being in the Sarlacc and comes out of that a changed person. Get that, it's great. But it wasn't hammered home enough at the end.
Mhm.
For me personally, anyway. It's like, you know, he comes out, he's walking down that alleyway, and he sort of says to Fennec, like, "Oh, we're not really made for this life or whatever. And I was like, okay, so you've just spent 7 episodes like saying that you're a crime lord and that you are the new Jabba the Hutt, and that's great, and now you decided to renounce that. Fine, but I just don't think they've made a big enough.
He doesn't
point
believe
of
it.
To say,
he doesn't believe in himself to do that.
No, and it's like it's fine if he wants to go and do something else. That's great, but like, it just wasn't spotlighted enough.
Yeah,
It's just like it's like a throwaway line of like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go do something else now. Okay, so what was the point of this?
Yeah, like I get, like I guess he's the mayor now, but like, what does that mean? Because like he clearly cares about people. This is the whole juxtaposition with himself too. Yeah, this is the weird juxtaposition with the character that is a little hard to get behind, where it's just like, you're telling a story of a changed man. He doesn't even believe that he is a changed man. How do we juggle that? Like, what does that actually mean in the like, the only actual conclusion that we have is like, a bunch of Pikes died and left. Like, what does it mean? Like, you gotta actually give us some sort of conclusion to that.
I think there needed to be something a little more about him, finding a family and not being like a lone gunslinger. And it's kind of alluded to, like, in his duel with Cad Bane.
Yeah.
Because he's like, this is your last lesson. Like, whatever, I'm going to shoot you in the face. Cool. And in him killing Cad Bane with the gaffy stick, it's kind of the symbol of like, well, this is the strength that I've got from having a family and leaning on other people and sort of renouncing my ways as a bounty hunter. And that's how he overcomes Cad Bane. Like, the themes are there, it just wasn't clear enough. Like,
but then they're undermined as soon as it's him and Fennec walking through the city, and he's like, why do we have to do this? It's like, because you said you wanted to do this. That's why you have to do this.
You shot Bib Fortuna in the face. That's why you have to do this.
It's required of you. It's... And that's the thing with, like, with the Cad Bane stuff, it should, like, it was super exciting and hype to have a live action version of that character. But that mirror image should have been more pronounced. And like, it's not that it wasn't in the moment, but that moment of confrontation when he is standing over Boba Fett, like, Boba Fett needs to, in that moment, like, literally say, like, no, I found my family. That's what gives me strength. He needs to actually say it.
Needed.
Yeah.
That's all it would have needed. And it would have been, I'd have felt much more, like, I don't know, it just would have had more of a resolute ending.
Yeah,
it would have made more sense.
It boils down to, like, the simplicity of the end of the first Raimi Spider-Man movie. Like, as much, like, as that final fight is super cool, where they're just one-on-one in, like, the spooky abandoned building, like, the peak moment of that is, I've been like a father to you, be a son to me. And he says, I have a father. His name was Ben Parker. It's so simple. It's so simple. But that moment, above all the memorable, like, cool action sequences, whatever, in that movie, whether or not you may think it, like, lives up to this day or not, whatever, that moment is the definition of that movie. That's all that you need, is like that one moment of dialogue. I don't know how many people, like, how many times we have to see people not learn that lesson to, like, hammer home that, like, this is your story conclusion. The story conclusion isn't just a bunch of fun action stuff for action stuff's sake. That is cool, and I'm glad that we get that. Like, him riding a Rancor, awesome, love it. But
that was cool. I did like they paid that off.
Yeah, but, like,
because it was another thing that disappeared for ages.
It's a side conclusion. Like, that's the thing, is like, it's not his actual, like, growth conclusion. And that's what's ultimately disappointing about this show, is that, like, if they had just gone with this thing where he was just whatever, he is still the same guy. Like, he's still just like a ruthless kind of character. Then you can just end it however you want with like, cool, there's a big explosion. I'm fine with that ending. Totally all right. But like, just when you set up so much with like the interesting dynamics with the Tuskens and then going forward and forming a new family, like he has a newfound family, follow through with that, because that is the only way that it's going to be satisfying in the end, to actually say like, this is who I choose to be around me because I trust them, as opposed to being that loner. And it's, that's ultimately this show comes down to that. As many different things as we can nitpick and say pacing was off and maybe it should have been part of Mandalorian and whatever, it's like ultimately that is the one thing that even if they did that other stuff, it still wouldn't have worked because they did that.
But like, again, I did enjoy it.
I still like Star Wars. I'm going to enjoy my popcorn moments with Star Wars. It's just execution. That's the only thing.
I think and again, like, the cameo stuff all worked really well, and I do really appreciate the fact that they're leaning into the Clone Wars of it all and Rebels, like with the Darksaber stuff. But I think that it's becoming a crutch. I think it's more about, how can we, surprise fans with something, that you wouldn't expect to be tied to Boba Fett, Luke Skywalker, for example.
How can we get them to smile for 3 seconds versus how can we get them to love this show overall? That's
and it's kind of it's weirdly kind of cheap. It's like, hey, there's that thing I like. Why is it relevant?
Well, and that is sort of I love the MCU. Don't get me wrong. It sort of feels like these shows are chasing their formula, and like DC tried that. Didn't work. It's not a formula that you can just like place in, because they actually built the formula over time. They didn't just go like, okay, as much as I like the first Thor movie, I don't think the general consensus is like, it's one of the best movies of all time. It's like, no, it's just a piece of the puzzle that they built moving forward. And then like around phase 2 is when they really started to like hone in on like, this is what we do. Those first movies they all feel way more different than any of the movies do now. So like, it's
like, that's why Mandalorian works really well, because it did something different. And it was just going into new territory, new characters, like completely new style, and it worked a treat. And Boba Fett just kind of replicated it, and it was fine, but it just was like, well, we've seen this. Even to the point, I know there was a lot of people on Twitter that loved the train sort of sequence in.
But we just saw it in Solo. We just got it in Solo. Like, it was cool.
You also got Mandalorian. In season 2, they have that whole explosive truck thing, and they're being assaulted by raiders, and it's like, this is the same thing. And somebody pointed out to me on Twitter that yes, that is a common trope in Western movies.
And that one specifically is a little more like Bridge over River Kwai than like a train heist, but like still it is like a similar structure.
We've seen it. It's like, oh, they're hiding behind a plate while somebody shoots at them. Right, okay, cool. Solo did that like however many years ago. Come on.
And also it, like, that sequence in Solo is fantastic. Like, it's as much as that may be a hit or miss movie for people, I think that's still like a fantastic sequence if you were just watching different sequences out of context. But
because it has the whole, it's a train heist, but it's also like around a mountain in the middle of the air. It's
dynamic and has stakes, whereas this is just, there's no, it's like putting a thing in, like, if you're just photoshopping an image but you don't put something in for scale, where it's just like, okay, here's a thing. It could be a football field size, it could be the size of an apple, we don't know. Whereas, like, yeah, when you're going with something like this, you need to actually make it seem like once they're on top of the train, sure, like, you get that scale and you get the stakes of, like, if they get knocked off of it, they're done. But, like, when you're just looking at it, that could just be a bunch of, like, Hyundai Sonatas tied together, and like cool, all right, that's fine. But yeah,
when it comes to, like, the Western imagery of it all as well, I did really like how they introduced Cad Bane. Just a lone gunslinger strolling into town, and that whole standoff with Cobb Vanth was perfect. Like, I really appreciated that. I just think it's a little bit of a shame that it was just thrown in as a surprise, just as like a, hey, look, it's that thing that you like.
And that, I feel like that should have been.
Aren't going to care.
Yeah, and
you know what I mean? Like, if you've not seen Clone Wars, that makes zero sense whatsoever.
It also shouldn't have been in that episode. That should not have been in the first of the 2 Mandalorian episodes. That should have been at least in the previous episode, if not another episode before that, where he, it is going back and forth for Boba Fett in time periods, but, like, you could have introduced it in the last shot of the episode prior or the one before that.
In a similar way to the how they revealed that Boba Fett was back. Like, they never showed him when when Fennec was, like, dead in the desert with. They didn't know who it was. They just had some with Spurs. They could have quite easily done something similar and teased that out, which would have been, I think, it would, like you said earlier, it would have been much more impactful.
Well, it also would have allowed people to, if they don't know who Cad Bane is, they could have, with that introduction, you do like showing a spur or something like that, and then people can look into who could this be for a week, and then they come out on the other end with, like, the reveal of who it is. But, like, I am excited with the Cobb Vanth stuff. Like, it's weird to, like, have to I totally forgot from last season of Mandalorian that, like, all right, there is a post-credit scene, like, this is Star Wars, but, like, it's a little weird. Granted, we got it with Solo, but, like, which unfortunately seems like it's never going to be followed up on. But the post-credit stuff with this being that they're making RoboCobb, which is I am very excited about that. Like, I outside of this show, I really like that character because the Aftermath trilogy I think is a fantastic thing that Chuck Wendig put together. But I'm super stoked to see that they are going forward with this Robert Rodriguez, like, weird cyborg stuff, which has always been in Star Wars, but, like, his style is on it now. I do like that maybe somebody else will be in charge of it, though. Like, going forward, I would.
Do you think it'll tie into the Rangers of the New Republic,
if that even still happens?
However that sort of pans out, like, it kind of just feels like a setup for that rather than, like, the Cobb Vanth show, which would just be justified, but Star Wars.
If they do a second season of this show, since he's in Boba's Bacta tank, I mean, that would be the most obvious one, but I would like the idea of him being a sheriff, and you have the setup of Rangers, like, do it. Just that, it makes so much more sense. You don't have to fully cancel that idea, just rearrange it. It doesn't have to be Rangers and X-Wings. It can be actual sheriffs. Like, that would be...
Well, they're maybe not on Tatooine, because
well, I wouldn't mind it if... Here's the thing.
I'm getting a bit like Anakin. I'm starting to hate sand.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Do it as a show where the episodes all focus on different people. Like, you don't
like an anthology.
Exactly. Do an anthology where you started off with the Cobb Vanth one, and then you do an episode introducing a new character, an episode introducing a new character, and then you maybe finish it on to bookend with another Cobb Vanth character or episode.
Easily,
and that's
there's easily a way of like having some sort of through line as
Yeah.
well. Like,
well,
you have it with
you have them
either
in
the Pike Syndicate or like Crimson Dawn.
yeah, and you just have them all in communication with each other through the New Republic. Like it's that's it doesn't take much. Like, but yeah, well,
Disney call
yeah.
us.
Look, this is all Disney stuff here. This is Disney, Star Wars Lego sets. Come on, I'm here. But yeah, cool. Well, I think we covered it pretty in depth, so I think we could probably call it there.
So.
For folks who maybe don't know where to find you, why don't you tell them where they can do that?
You can find me on Twitter at Eammon Jacobs. You can also find my work on like sites like Looper or The Digital Fix or Zavvi or Metro or Radio Times, because I've got more bylines than you can shake a stick at, which is great. So
that freelancing style,
that freelance life, you know, glued to my desk. But you know, I'm relatively friendly. Come say hello. That'd be nice.
Keep that in mind. That's
relatively
the wrong day.
There's a healthy dose of sarcasm, you know.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I will also just add in that on the YouTube channel for Push Your Glasses Up, I have started doing some trailer reactions. So I've done like Lightyear, and I did what else got me a copyright claim? I just did Jurassic World Dominion, which I'm thrilled with how that looks. I'm very excited for it.
So am I.
Yeah.
Pleasantly surprised, actually.
I did like Fallen Kingdom more than most people, but I think a lot of that is just the fact that I love the homage of the 1970s Dracula stuff at the end. But needless to say, I will be doing more of those. So keep an eye out for those. They're usually about 5 minutes long, so it doesn't take too much investment. But until next time, thanks for watching, listening, and we'll see you then. Bye.